Hello, everybody, and welcome to Butting Heads. I'm Adam, and with me today is Chris. Today, we're going to be talking about the Sam Seder versus Destiny debate on student loan forgiveness. Should we do it or should we not? Along with the trouble that has been going on in Cuba, the United States' response to it, and what's been going on in the background of the country. So, Chris, tell me what your thoughts are on the Destiny Seder debate.
Yeah, so first of all, for anyone who doesn't know, I differ from both of them politically. I'm not aligned exactly politically with both of them, but
So
I
you're a
just
fascist.
also exactly. But I do. I'm one of those people. I like seeing two smart people talk about something, and I know they both have their detractors, and I'll definitely rip on both of them. But I thought they did a decent job. There are some criticisms about the conversation as a whole that we were talking about that we definitely want to get into. But for those of you who don't know, Sam Cedar and Destiny are two internet personalities who were discussing student loan debt forgiveness and the situation the country is in and what we should do about it. And so Destiny felt like um, if you forgive student loan debt, you're helping out the people in society who have college degrees and they have earnings potential. And there's a lot of people who didn't get college degrees because, for one reason or another, finances, or they just chose to go another path that would be completely left out. And Sam was trying to make the argument that this is a really progressive policy and that this is something America should be trying to do. And yeah, so that's just the basic gist of it. And so to start off with, the first thing they started talking about was is would forgiving student loan debt be a progressive or regressive type of policy? So Adam, I just want to kind of kick it back to you. Do you have any opinion on that?
Um, yeah, to be honest, I really don't, right? What is the I think any policy that solves an issue is by definition like a progressive policy, but I think um I think certain points that Destiny brought up was actually fairly good in terms of if we are going to prioritize and do the political will, have use political capital on this issue, is it really the most progressive issue that we should be trying to fix right now, right? Like
Yeah. Is it progressive or is it regressive? Well, of course, there's homeless people, there's people who don't have college degrees, there's people on the lower end who wouldn't be getting helped out,
yeah, and arguably
and
those
also
people on the lower end need the more help.
then they need more help. So then in that case, it's regressive, but then also you have that this would also more proportionately affect this wouldn't help the wealthy class exactly. There's also people above higher on the economic ladder who wouldn't be receiving benefits of this
Mm-hmm.
either. And I kind of would compare it to like if you were to just do a tax cut and you were to pick like one tax bracket right in the middle, like someone who earns 50,000 a year, and
Yeah,
you were to just slash that one tax bracket, is that regressive or
or
progressive?
progressive,
And
and
really, in my mind, it's neither. And they did spend a lot of time. For anyone who hasn't watched the debate, we'll throw the link to that debate in the description in case you do want to watch it. But yeah, they spent a lot of time arguing if it was regressive or progressive, and I think they should have just moved on from that point because it's neither.
yeah,
And we should just debate the merits of should you cancel student loan debt? Should you cancel all of it? Should you target certain people? And so yeah, Adam, as far as student loan debt, like I don't know, what are your thoughts about a universal policy of just canceling all the
So
student loan debt?
any student loan debt cancellation policy has to be coupled with like some level of like free college or college price discrimination. Like, because then you're just gonna be doing it all over again. You're not really de-incentivizing like people taking out massive loans for paying for like ballooning like prices of college, right? Like it's true that hardly anyone pays like the sticker price of like a college. Like if it's like $20,000 a year to go like to your state school, very rarely are people paying $20,000 a year. There are people who are paying $20,000 a year, but those people are in like an extreme minority. But those prices keep on like increasing past the rate of inflation. There needs to be like a policy that can either lower those prices increase or just make it full stop free, because then you'll be in the same situation 20 years from now.
Yeah, and I completely agree. You can't cancel the student loan debt and then okay, but now tomorrow, whoever incurs student loan debt, you can't just have a one-time cancellation of student loan debt and
Yeah,
it
you're
that
you're
just seems
putting
silly. You would
it's
have to
like,
go with free college for people all in one bill.
yeah, it's like someone cuts off your arm and you like wrap up and stop the bleeding, and then you're like, oh guys, I still have my arm back, and it's like, no, you're still losing blood. What are you doing?
Yeah,
You
and
just put a band-aid.
I think as the US economy has switched from a manufacturing economy to a
To service
services
based, yeah.
economy, it does require more skills. And as technology has advanced, there's the internet, there's a lot more need for web developers, and all sorts of industries have advanced, and there's a need for more intellectually based workforce. So I do think the need for college has gone up. The costs have gone up exponentially for college, to pay for college.
Yeah,
And I just
unfortunately,
think
it
that,
follows a really good supply and demand curve. Unfortunately.
yeah. And so, but I think this country manages to educate people in kindergarten, first grade, all the way through 12th grade. We managed to do that because we realized it's important. And now all of a sudden to say, well, once you hit 13th grade, which I'll call your freshman year at college, now they're, I don't know if the government should be getting involved to teach you
Right.
beyond a certain point. Like where is the line that the government should just now everyone has to pay for it?
Yeah.
And I do think like on a general sense, like and I was even looking at a study from 2013, the University of South Carolina, that student loan debt causes people anxiety and depression, and we do have a generation of people who are getting as much as the cost of college has gone up, the value of these degrees are seem to be going down. And even just my own story, like I worked for a few months at Walmart after I graduated college, just in between jobs. And at first, I was like really embarrassed about it. But then I realized everyone here has a college degree already. And this is where they work. And they couldn't land the job that they thought they were being educated to be able to get. So I realize there is like a huge, huge problem here with student loan debt. But as kind of me and Adam were listening to the debate, you can see that it's not just so simple sometimes to just easily slash all the student loan debt and make college free. So, Adam, I kind of want to kick it back to you. What could be some adverse effects of
So,
doing this?
yeah. So, like, Chris and I live in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey recently passed like a trial program for like free community colleges, and they've been like going towards like to like the lower income counties, which is, in my opinion, a good idea, right? a lot of the college professors at like my local community college were like, I was like, where I took a few classes at, um, they were a little bit concerned, not because they don't like the idea of people getting education, but because of the amount or the demand that that program may create. So like from their point of view, it's like, okay, well, this is going to happen before we get any good hires going on, before we might not have the space to do it. We're already like overworked when it comes to like classes and enrollment. And they were afraid that like it could destroy community colleges as they are, because as more people will go in, the college would have to raise the amount of requirements that they impose on the students. And that could be very terrible for people of lower income groups or who came from poor school districts, because a lot of times like the school district, the less money there is for the school, because property taxes are a huge contributing factor in paying for like your K through 12 education. And so inadvertently through that program, you could be prioritize or like just benefiting people from like middle class families who see the deal of like free 2 year college, will take it, and in turn you have like the poor education who, or like the people from the poor background who could use that college as like a jumping off point to like an actual like career of like a higher income job level, being able to like create wealth, be priced out of it or be knocked out of it because they were born in a worse situation than the middle class people who are taking the better deal, which if it's a universal
Yeah.
program, they have every right to take.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to acknowledge, and although I disagreed with what Destiny was saying in the debate, we do have to acknowledge one thing. There's a lot of people in this society without college degrees, and if we pass a law helping out the people with college degrees, it's only going to create a bigger disparity between the people at the bottom of the economic ladder and the people sort of in the middle of the economic ladder. And people who said, hey, this college is too expensive, like I'm not going to go do that, like I'm going to try and find my own way. Well, now those people, whether they were financially unable to or whether they just, they wanted to be responsible, and they just thought it was irresponsible to take out all the student loan debt for a degree that they weren't even positive were even going to get them a job. And so there are people in society who, now that they kind of, or even those families who they saved up for their kids college, like they weren't a rich family, but they were a family that knew the importance of college, and they saved up since their kid was born all the way till they were 18, and they paid for it by hand.
Yeah.
And then just to see the guy next to you whose family said, you can just go and take out a student loan debt, and now that person is now going to have all that debt relieved, why another family who did the right things and did what you're supposed to do in society,
Yeah.
it's just kind of being left out to dry. And those are points that
Yeah, because like,
Destiny brought up. Yeah,
yeah,
go
like, because
ahead.
like you could kind of like take like, you can think of like families of like similar income level, right? Like they like that could be like the difference. Saving up for like your child's college could be the difference between like going on vacation that year or putting money away into like a college fund. So you are like, it's not like they like, it's a good thing that they're able to like actually afford to like save up for college, and that doesn't mean they're like the most like troubled family out there or like the like in dire straits. But that doesn't mean that there weren't sacrifices that were made to make those savings.
Exactly. And there is something off about like those families now. Just, you
Yeah,
shouldn't have done that. You actually should have did the
yeah, like
thing that
how dare
everyone was telling
you?
you not to
Yeah,
do.
like not how dare you not go to the Bahamas? Like You saved up for
Yeah.
your child over like an awesome trip. How dare you?
Yeah.
What are you,
You should
idiot?
have known that this was all a Ponzi scheme,
Yeah.
and that we were gonna have to just slash the debt at some point
Well, look,
anyway.
it was around the corner. Any idiot could have seen it. I know,
So
because I was that idiot.
and then so yeah, and like Destiny also brings up the point like yeah, like let's say you get a degree and you even maybe you go and get your master's, or you go get your medical degree, your law degree. Even though you might be strapped with student debt, of course, your future earnings potential,
Is
as you brought up, for
huge.
those of you who've seen the debate, yeah,
Huge.
you have future earnings potential. And so are we just going to stimulate the people with large future earnings potential, while people with high school diplomas who don't have that college degree, or maybe took a couple classes and then dropped out for whatever reason, those people don't have the future earnings potential, and they're just kind of being left high and dry. So I
But
completely
Chris,
agree with that.
but Chris,
But at the same time, like, we have a problem on our hands. There's a problem in this country, and there's a problem with the cost of college going up, the need for our economy to have college educated people, and
hmm
there's a problem here. And so yeah, so how do you balance that? How do you balance that? Because the answer for me can't just be, well, the people who saved, the people who saved, it would be unfair to the people who saved for college, so that there's really just nothing you can do. uh I just think that's wrong. And I think that coupled with this, we do need to have serious economic programs for people on the bottom of the economic ladder. And if we have to start there first before we do the student loan forgiveness, then fine. But I mean, this is an issue, and then the country has to solve it. And some parts of it might be unfair, for sure.
hmm
And that's just something we need to think about. We shouldn't have these raging people online. Just eliminate all the student loan debt. What's so hard about it? What are we thinking twice about? There are things to think twice about, and I think that's Destiny did a good job of bringing that up.
Yeah, and that's like honestly probably what Destiny best provides in like the online space. Like he definitely does. Like I feel like you can get stuck in like an echo chamber a lot, and then like you will see him who like it was pretty consistent with his beliefs. Just poke up like okay, but like what about this? Or isn't that wouldn't this be an issue as well? And it does help poke the bubble and it does push the conversation further. This is now something.
And
Um,
and then and one solution me and Adam passed around was, you know, what about just going back to the old universal basic income? You cut
yeah,
everyone a check every
like
month or
yeah,
every quarter.
yeah, like
And if you want to pay off your student loan debt, you can. But if your family saved and they
you still
paid for
get the
your
money.
college itself, then you can use the money to.
Right, because at the
eh,
end of the day, like a student debt relief is technically just one gigantic stimulus, but like it would also be one of the worst stimulus ever because it would just go to banks. Like no one will actually be like getting the money itself. They just wouldn't have negative money in a way.
And yeah, and I think there is a problem. Also, interest on our loans for education. We do. There are some things we need to figure out a way to educate people more efficiently and at a lower cost. Um, but also something me and you were talking about, like free college. Like I have a problem with, because when I went to college, and I'm sure a lot of people listening can agree, it's a money making pit where all your money goes towards things that are going to help the college make more money. So something like a library, that's not going to bring in as many students into the school as, say, a new football stadium. So, and even at my college, like I tried to look for like basic books, like like I can't remember exactly, but an example would be like I tried to find like The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith,
Wait, is
and
that
the
like a real
library.
story?
I'm not
Or
saying
like it was like
exactly
on
that
par with
book,
like
but
Adam
like
Smith.
on
Okay,
par. Like
okay.
I'm looking for books that should just be in every single college library. And the library was huge, but
Mm-hmm.
when you actually went on the shelves, it was all these giant volumes of like PhD economic papers, and it was just all these shelves of like these not just like a normal book. It was all this like weird hyper academic
I mean,
like
that doesn't sound too
which
bad.
yeah, no, it doesn't sound too bad, but shelves and shelves and floors. What it was that on orientation they bring you in and say, hey, this is a library, and you go, wow, it's like 2 stories filled with books. And it's only when you actually first walk in there you see they don't have just books written by authors like a library should have. But
Okay.
of course that they had a nice football stadium, and like even like my school, like they didn't have any parking, and the one of the biggest parking lots they had, they decided to build a giant dorm room and get rid of the parking lot, and they built the dorm room right where the parking lot was. So now all of us, we didn't have a place to park before. Now they're going to add thousands of students and park in the wrong spot. We'll just throw them a parking ticket. Then we can get even more money out of them. And I do have a problem with like, okay, I definitely want to see universal education. Like I said, our economy needs college educated people.
Yeah.
But are we really going to do the thing where we just pump money straight into these schools? I think that can be dangerous. I
Mm-hmm.
think that can be, there has to be stipulations that come with that. Are you just going to take, the government's just going to pay for your free school and the school's just going to take that money and build a football stadium with it? That cannot be. They would have to build classrooms and hire professors and increase their training. I think this isn't just a layup knockout issue, no brainer. Just
Yeah.
eliminate the student debt and make the college free.
Yeah.
It's those are two things me and Adam both in some way advocate for.
And that's
Yeah,
that's like a huge difference, right? Because like it is so easy to just say, well, why don't we just do free college right now? Why don't we just do X program right now? Well, there's a ton of logistics that go into doing like any single policy proposal that you can think of, because we live in a complex society, in a complex system, and you have to account for what exists within those systems. College is a lot more than just go and get an education. You just sit in a classroom and that's it. No, there are like entire like they're like mini cities in a way, and it's like okay, so they're subsidized. Well, okay, like does this include board? Like the education side may be subsidized, but is like the room and board subsidized? What are the prices for the room and board? Because they're insane.
also, do
Do
you
we
pay
cut
for someone to get a degree in sports
sports?
management? Do you do that? That's a question. Or
And
do
that will
you
be
only
one
pay
thing.
for
Yeah.
web development and math and the things that our economy
And
needs?
personally, I would say yes to everything. But like I can also just see like I like understand why people are like, well, no, it should we should not be paying for someone's art degree or whatever. Like, what are you gonna do with an art degree? And
Yeah. And so I've thought of an idea, and I know this definitely isn't perfect, but if the government just offered, they hired these like a bunch of awesome professors to do online classes, and we threw a ton of money into them being able to make beautiful video, presentations to students, and try and keep the classrooms, just like you do in online classes, like 20 kids in a class, and something like a free federal online college that you wouldn't just be pumping money into schools to build football stadiums. But I know there are problems with that. Like
with
if
certain
you get a
degrees,
nursing degree,
nursing engineering is like the biggest one. Comp sci as
nursing
well.
degree, you actually need to work in a hospital. You can't just teach someone that like completely online. So I know that doesn't solve every problem, but
Yeah. No, but like it's definitely like a good alternative as well, right? If you want someone to have like general education classes, you can totally do calc online. You can totally do language arts online.
Right.
You can
Or
totally do
maybe
history
we're
classes
gonna get a
online.
nursing degree. Maybe you can bang out your gen ed classes that the school was gonna make you
And then
take
yeah, and then
online and then transfer that, and then you go to your actual college, and then you go
yeah,
and you go to the hospital if you're a nursing major, and they you do your semester there. Um but yeah, this is a tough issue. This is a really tough issue, and it's something we have to solve.
yeah. And it's easier for us to say like what the end result would look like because the end result would look like a free college system with uh, no student debt, but like it's getting to there and making that system program that's difficult.
And also, I think we need to get down. Is the point of college to train you for the workforce, or is the point of college to expand your mind and your critical thinking, and to just enlighten you?
It's totally
Because I
yeah.
think that gets conflated, because half the time it's about training you for the workforce, but then, okay, well, why am I sitting taking a geology class about rocks when I'm a finance major?
Yeah, probably
So
one of like my biggest arguments. My most uncommon opinion was like when I was in school was always just like there is no such thing as a class that is independent of your nature or
sure,
of your
right? Because
major. Like
right, sure,
because so many people are like, "Ugh,
sure,
this is an elective. Why am I taking this elective? This has nothing to do with what I want to do." It's like if you can't find like anything from this class, God help you.
yeah.
Because
I mean, right,
if you
yeah,
can't see the connections that like really all academia really has with one another or like what special trait exists within like certain fields that you can't really separate out,
right.
God help you.
Like if you're a finance major, maybe one day someone comes into a business who sometimes it's just good to know, like or even like I took a really advanced biology class when I was in college, and
Hmm.
I was economics and finance, but I did realize, like, if you looked at the stock market, especially when I was going to college, the health
Oh, the
and
healthcare. Yes.
biomedicine
Oh
and
my
all
gosh.
those
Yes.
stocks were ripping
Went
and roaring. And
huge.
actually, if you had a knowledge in biology, you might be able to actually look at these companies and really understand the science behind
Yeah.
why their company is profitable, or maybe why the stock is going up based on nothing, if you actually knew the biology behind. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you that you could teach biology to a finance major, and then they could use that.
That to like actually because they would be able to like understand they would have better information to like evaluate if they do want to go into like stock and like management and whatnot
Yeah,
or like to be like yeah a stockbroker like that is huge information and they would totally be complaining every step of the way of why they have to take that biology class or and like
right.
even just
Not
like
realizing how much it would help later on.
yeah and like really like I remember that, like around that time period too it was when like the Affordable Care Act came out and that like really helped a lot of companies up because there's now a lot more
There's now a
demand
lot more
and
people who are gonna
to have
need
health insurance. Yeah,
treatments.
you added
Yeah,
10 million people to the health market, which really
absolutely.
like yeah. And so like there could be a political science level right there where it's just
And
like
and I always look at education sort of like lifting weights. Like I took a lot of calculus courses in college too, and I right now in my career I don't necessarily use that intensive amount of math, but I also look at it like it's sort of like lifting weights. Like when you're a football player, you lay down on a bench press and you lift something straight up, but of course when you're playing football, you're never doing that exact motion, but what you're doing is just strengthening yourself, and it for the things that you do have to do in
right.
football, where you and so even if you never do use a shred of calculus, um it's just good brain training to be able to learn the next thing that you want to be able to learn in your life.
Okay, so the reason why everyone needs to learn math or why math is really important in a person's life even if you don't quote unquote use it is it teaches you critical thinking and being able to evaluate situations based on what you're given so that way you can find a solution to a problem.
Oh
That's why you
yeah.
learn math. You don't need to know
Yeah,
the Pythagorean theorem, but you have to be able to
you're
use
right.
your tools in order to create a solution.
You're right. And what is it like when history? It's like what happened in it's very like input.
Yeah,
Here's the question. This is the exact answer. And I think in math, it's sort of like, well, we're
you
going to
have
give
to
you a
find
question on
yeah.
the test that you've never seen before, and you have to actually just figure it out in real time while you're taking a test. And so, yeah, you're right. It does teach you how to figure stuff out,
And also develops
you
like
know?
pattern recognition too, where it's just like, oh, this is
Right.
just like this other problem, or it's like, oh, this is close to that problem, but it's not exactly this problem because there's like maybe like an extra no and like the like what's given. I can't think of an example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Like yeah,
But yeah, so anyway, back to the student loan debt and the free college thing. We got to do something about this, but everyone needs to hold their horses on, because we'd be leaving a lot of people in the economy behind, and we just got to make sure that we're not doing that, because I couldn't stand it if certain people were able to get help and certain people were left behind. I think the way for this country to move forward is we got to be taking everybody with us. So one of those things, you cannot just stop at just the student loan thing and then, okay, so we got rid of that whole problem, everything's fine in the world. It will not correct the ills of our society. It will only help ease the suffering of people who have student loan debt and people who want to attain an education for themselves.
yeah.
But all right.
uh, yeah. Any final thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty good with that. I am excited to get into the Cuba topic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure thing. Want to jump into it then?
Yeah, so as you guys probably know, there's been a lot of media coverage around protests in Cuba. And so me and Adam just want to talk about what's right, what's wrong, and just kind of give anyone who's listening just a good background on Cuba. And especially, I think in America, I think you have to really seek out knowledge of Cuba and what happens there, because on the day-to-day basis, it's just not something that Americans know. And if you just start talking about a protest one day, it's absent of all the background history. Like when you see a BLM protest, well, every American not every American, but Americans on some level or another have an understanding of the last 300 years, whether it's a good understanding or a faulty understanding. There's more of a basis that when you see a BLM protest, we can kind of have an opinion on that. But when you see protests in Cuba and people know nothing really other than there's a protest in Cuba,
And they kind of
it's how can
Americanize
you
the
have an opinion
situation.
on that? Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Like they
um
put like American values onto like what's been going on and whatnot, or they will put on like their preconceived notions, and yeah, that's probably like one of the biggest issues to like discourse, especially when it comes to like foreign countries. Which
but
makes yeah, okay. No, go on.
well, I was going to say, for those of you who don't know, are protests protesting the government, and you know, that's good. If they're not happy with your government, you should protest it. I mean, that's what me and Adam are doing here, and we love our country, but we talk about politics to force change, because um that's what politics is about. You go towards being a more perfect society, and so it's patriotic to protest what goes on in your country. But also, too, something that really wasn't as much reported on. There was also pro-government protests of people as well. So that's just something that I think everyone should understand. There's pro-Cuba, there's pro-government protest and anti-government protests going on at the same time.
There was also internet being shut down during the anti-government protest as well, and it was shut down for like a full day or a few days afterwards to like stop the spread of information and from like the Cuban police going in and beating up the protesters. Like
Yeah.
that's
So the government in Cuba does not support the anti-government protests because
it doesn't
it is
allow
very
dissent.
authoritarian there. But I think just to give a quick little history of Cuba, they had a revolution or around I want to say in the
50s,
50s,
late 50s.
50s, maybe 60s. Okay, yeah, 50s. So they had a government, they had I think it was a parliament, but they had a democratic, elected body of people who ran the country, and then there was a military coup, and you had a dictator, Batista, who authoritarianly just ruined this country and just was an absolute horrible dictator and had no popularity. So the only way for him to stay in power was to be even more and more brutal towards people. And eventually the people just rose up and had a revolution. And one of the leaders of the revolution was Fidel Castro. One of the things that really gave him his popularity was he kicked out American corporations who were harvesting the land and the resources of Cuba and then taking those profits back to America. He kicked them out. He gave the land that the peasants were working on for the U.S. corporations. He gave the land after he kicked them out that they had all this land now because they just kicked out the corporation. So they literally gave the land to the peasants who were working on it. And I'm talking mostly about like tobacco and sugar cane and farmland. They gave this land back out to the peasants, and also they created a universal healthcare system, which is more than you can say about almost any other country on earth. They've increased the literacy rate to 99%, and even the poorest people in Cuba have access to education and being able to read. And he created all these social changes that made Fidel Castro really popular. But also, on the other hand, there were people in Cuba who were against just kicking out all the corporations and giving the land to all the peasants and having everything be run by the government. And
And
more it became about there's not even going to be private ownership. Everything is going to be owned by the government, and anyone who speaks out
going
is
to a
liable
camp.
to be killed or
Yeah.
arrested. And so on one strain you have this amazing feat of almost unseen in the world where you brought wealth to the poorest people of your society. But then on the other hand you have this sort of you can't speak out against that. And even though the revolution was to get rid of the dictator and to fight for democracy, what you had was Fidel Castro, who ruled the country for like 60 years, him and his brother. And so is that democracy? Did they just win? They just won an election every 4 years? No. They held on to the power in their own way. And even people who were part of the revolution with them, if
Spoke
at
out.
any
Yeah.
point they diverged from the plan, even the most loyal people to Fidel Castro were subject to harsh punishment. So I
Yep.
think people just need to keep all that in mind.
Yep. And yeah, absolutely. Uh, like the Castro regime and like the way the government is set up in like Cuba right now is like sure they hold elections, but you have to be approved by the party. There's only one party, and you have to be a candidate approved by them. And I don't even think they hold nationalized elections. Like the elections are really just in like certain specific districts. That's the only time in which people vote, and then after that, it's just different party members who vote on who gets what positions where.
Yeah,
Like,
so and that is sort of the thing we were talking about with communism. Like, is there room, and I said this to you last night, is there room for a state like Kentucky to just elect a Mitch McConnell into the parliament of the communist government? Well, no.
no,
You can't, or at least I'm not going to say theoretically it's impossible, but just in practice, the way it happens in Cuba and the Soviet Union and in China, you
well,
can't just have any guy with any beliefs like Mitch
you
McConnell. As much as I hate Mitch McConnell, I still think if that's who the people of Kentucky choose to represent them,
that's
then he
the
should have a space
yeah,
in our Congress, because that's democracy.
yep.
And so that's the part of what they did. I love the fact that you just have a focus on health and education, and that people aren't just going to work and serve US corporations. And you know, and there is a part about Cuba, like compared to China, like China has factories with suicide nets and people working 15-hour days just to have something to eat. And where Cuba, you don't see that. Cuba, you don't have to work 15 hours a day.
There goes our
There,
sponsorship deal from the Chinese government.
there is a genuine, or there's some level, there is something in there in Cuban society that really is about helping the average common man, and that's all great and good, but you do have to balance that with, you can't just arrest anybody who
You also have
says something you don't like.
Yeah, you also have to allow a press. Like for instance, like a lot of like foreign journalists will like say like Cuba is one of the worst like countries to actually go to like report on with a story because you have to make it past their censors. This is just something that just doesn't exist like in like what we would consider freer countries. It just isn't there. Like without a free press, you don't have a free movement of information. You don't have free dissent being publicized. Like,
And yeah, and so I do want to get into the embargo, because on one hand, again, this is always a tale of two stories. So on one hand, the Cuban government uses the embargo. Anything that goes wrong,
in
any little
Cuba, you
thing,
blame America because of the
you
embargo.
blame
Yeah,
America and the embargo. And that is wrong. And that's part of their way to keep
keep the people
power on
distracted. Yeah,
people.
yeah, to
But
point to the American boogeyman.
on the other hand, the embargo is there to hurt people. And even if you ask anyone, why do you have an embargo? Well, the embargo's there to cut down exports and to cut down imports, and it's there. Well, why do you want to cut down imports and exports? Well, if you cut down imports and exports, then there's going to be less trade and there's going to be less jobs. And well, why do you want to have less trade and less jobs? And if you keep prying at it, there's no way to explain it. Well, you want less trade and less jobs because you want people to have less things and less money, and you want to hurt people. And that really is when you dive. You can't say, well, no, the embargo will actually help people in some way.
So
Maybe there's like this long-term strategy, but yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
Adam.
so the people who are like saying that are the same people who are who are the accelerationists who are like, actually, I want fascism to come to America because that means socialism will come right afterwards. They're like the accelerationists who want to like break a few eggs in order to like make an omelet. Where like the goal is make people so unhappy, so terrible in their lives that you foster like a need for revolution and having like whatever your country is. This is like that's like the idea between like sanctions
Right,
and what and like
right.
I read like the government accountability office of accountability like their paper on like sanctions, and an embargo is essentially a sanction. It's a much stricter than most sanctions, but like they don't work. According to the
Sanctions don't
GOA,
work.
they don't work. Like it works on countries who are already friendly to you and who you already have a very implicit like a very good relationship with in case, but other than that, they don't achieve your end goal or they don't achieve like this radical goal. They
Right.
end
And
up
you
just
see that in Cuba because it's still communist 60 years after an embargo.
exactly. And like look, we can say that like China like when like we liberalized China, like in the 90s, when China was opening up its markets, a lot of people were saying this is great news because once like their markets become more liberalized, they'll become a lot less authoritarian. Unfortunately, that probably didn't happen. They probably have new freedoms because now I think there's now more private property acceptance in China. So like that could be like we could say that's probably better. But in terms of like the way the government's still owned, it's still pretty top heavy, a lot more than we would like. But like I would say, Cuba and China are two completely different countries, and I think if you normalize trade relations between the United States and Cuba, Havana is only 90 miles away from like Key West, Florida, and like I think there used to be like actual tourists, like travel boats that went from like Florida to like Cuba like throughout the day. Like you would have like massive like imports of like Americans and Cubans going back and forth with each other. And it's just like mind numbing to me that like the American culture or like the American way of life just wouldn't go over to Cuba in terms of like freedoms that we have, like being able to vote in an election, having a newspaper, being able to speak differently and like call like a politician like a blithering dumbass.
Right.
Like
Yeah, that's something, and
And like it
we
can
we
also go
use
the other
that,
way.
right?
It could also go the other way around too, where it's just like I was just in Cuba, I like broke my arm and I got patched up just fine. Like and I didn't have to pay for
Right.
anything.
Right.
If
Where in
Cuba could
America,
yeah,
if
right?
you get the wrong disease, then
Yeah, you end
you're
up
out.
dying. Yeah,
You're
right? And like that could actually like really benefit both the nations, just like with like the again. Oh my gosh, I think this is the third time in a row I'm bringing this up. Like, but like as much as the meme, like the marketplace of ideas has become, that is actually like the market of ideas like working.
Yeah. And I think if people are so confident that communism doesn't work, then you wouldn't need to embargo Cuba
Yeah,
to prove that point, to hurt their economy so that to prove you're trying to prove that it doesn't work by hurting their economy purposely. But
yeah.
yeah, if you're that confident that their communism doesn't work, then you won't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the reason why like the embargo was so heavy is because A, Cuba was 90 miles away, and B, the Soviet Union at the time. Like, unfortunately, the embargo is a Cold War era policy that just never got rid of. Like, Cuba was never really that like it was never that strict because Cuba was like communist. It was because they were just very pro-Soviet and very anti-American. And
Yeah,
the,
you're right.
un,
It is a relic. It is a relic of an
yeah,
older time, and we're in a different situation. One thing I did just want to go through a little bit of the details of the embargo because there are a lot of people who say, "Listen, the embargo, you make it sound like it's just strictly there to hurt people." But of course, if they need to import food or medicine, they can totally do that. The embargo doesn't. The embargo doesn't. It's only things they're just trying to target the rich and the people in charge of Cuba, and they're trying as much as they can not to hurt the honest working man in Cuba. And so some things I'll say to that is one, it doesn't just freely allow anyone to trade food and medicine with Cuba. It the rules are really vague, and there's a lot of governmental regulatory hoops you have to go through, and businesses who have to evaluate risk and things like that. Sometimes it's not so easy, even if you're allowed to do it. Just the vagueness, and they purposely do make it vague for when you're allowed to sell them food and medical supplies and when you're not. And also that there's a part of the embargo that says, well, it's only US, and if another country wants to trade with Cuba, they totally can. And so how bad is this embargo? It's not like we're stopping the whole world from being able to trade with Cuba. We're just America's choosing not to trade with Cuba, but it's a little bit deeper than that, because if any company in the world has any assets in America and you trade with Cuba, those assets can be frozen. So it's the fact you can't trade with both America and Cuba. You need to choose, basically, and any big large multinational corporation is going to choose to do business in America. So even though it's only an American embargo, it functions as a way to stop the entire world from being able to trade with Cuba. And also, yeah, it makes the laws really unclear. And even if your company does business with Cuba and you're an executive of that company, you're actually not allowed to even travel to the United States. So there are consequences, and it's much more than just, oh, it's just food and medicine, and everyone else can trade with them, and it's really just these tiny things. No, this is much more encompassing than that. And the food and medicine, the fact that they are allowed to trade food and medicine, for me, that is just a PR, a public relations way, so that America, the American government, can say, well, we're only trying to help. And you can look at our policy that we do allow food and medicine into the country. So you can't pin this on us. And really, it's more of a PR thing. And an actual function, it doesn't function that way. They have a hard time getting food and medicine into the country, and they have a hard time trading with anyone else in the world. And so this embargo hurts people. And for me, it's wrong.
I guess like a few things, because you're right. The embargo is not a block. Like there are definitely people who think that like, oh, there are no consequences. This is like the embargo is strictly between like America and Cuba, and that there is no like downsides if you're like in the European Union and you like trade with Cuba. That's not true. There are definitely like restrictions that the United States will then like impose on your company because yeah, there it's an embargo, not a sanction. There are definitely more restrictions that are going to be put on play that are going to be like put in place, and more punishments if you like break the said embargo. But it's still not impossible. Like for instance, Cuba still does do trade with European Union groups. They do still trade with the Chinese, and they even trade with certain American companies. I think something like 5% of like of Cuba's GDP goes to buying food from America. And it is definitely something where it's like it does make things a lot more complicated. Like just reading certain stuff from like the state like government like or from like a state from like the State Department. It like you have to like go to like certain third party sources in order to like put like through your cash to expedite. There are certain, but then there's also like certain like religious groups and humanitarian groups that have special licenses where they can like provide the trade directly and whatnot, which is like a huge boom for them. Like, and then like, and on top of that, the way that the Cuban people like or like there are food vouchers that people can like trade in to get like certain food, and like you could not trade within like other districts outside of like your food vouchers, outside of like where you're from. And like as a result of the protests like last week, that restriction was finally like released. Like a lot of people will bring up like the embargo as just like a way to say like, oh, see, if only this wasn't around, then like everything would be like peachy dory. It's like no, they're like again, let's bring it back. There is definitely decisions that the Cuban government has made independent of the embargo that really have caused a lot of issues and a lot of strife, and is not the people's utopia that like a lot of people want to fantasize about.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, like this is just what we want to do for you. Just kind of break it down in a way that a lot of people on both sides of the argument won't, and just give you the straight how it is, and the embargo and the government, and there's blame on all sides of this.
Yeah.
Another point that me and Adam wanted to talk about too was
Is it the
um,
hypocrisy argument?
yeah, exactly. So free trade. A lot of people like Bernie
You mean
Sanders, and
exploitation of the third world?
so yeah, so a lot of people on the left like Bernie Sanders, and just a lot of people on the left. You might know
Like
Kyle
Kyle Kalinske.
Kalinske. Yeah, they're big into like protectionism, and they're big into not necessarily just having free trade with all countries, but then of course we talk about Cuba and the embargo, and it's like,
Oh, it's the only
yeah,
reason why that's happening. Oh,
yeah, the big blame is put on the embargo, but of
if
course
only they were allowed to trade with
you're a
America.
protectionist. Yeah, so why do you want to push for trade with Cuba so hard, but then someone wants to trade with China, or someone wants to trade with the European Union, and the TPP, you're right, the
Yeah.
Pacific Partnership,
And like we can
then
go
that's a big deal. But
yeah.
of course, we have to open the free trade with Cuba.
Yep, NAFTA
So
was a
there is a
disaster.
contradiction here on the left that nobody is talking about.
Yeah. And then like on the right, you could then also say where it's just like, "Wait, why are you okay with the embargo? You should be for free trade. You should
You
be
should
for
be for free
spreading.
trade.
You should be, as we were saying before, spreading the ideas, your obviously correct ideas that communism is wrong. Like what you
And right, and even if it's a small level, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting
Yeah.
your own country by not allowing
Hey,
yourself to import that cheap, good Cuban
so
sugar.
I can't get
And
that
then that
Cuban
Cuban
cigar.
cigar, exactly. And I'm sure there's more things. The tourism industry, you
Oh,
could take a
huge.
good vacation over to Cuba instead of having to pay 10 times as much to go all the way to
To
Jamaica
Dominican
or
Republic. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it hurts your own country just cutting off relations with Cuba as
Hmm.
well, and that's what is good about free trade. And I think the left, this is just weird that they can hold these two positions at the same time, and like I've heard
No one really bring it up. Like the
nobody brings this up, and I
like
think
a lot of people
yeah.
will like quote Noam Chomsky when like they were like, oh well, Noam Chomsky says that like free trade agreements are just the way that the first world nations exploit third world nations, or are just the way for first world nations to maintain power over third world nations. But it's just like, well,
But then they turn around and argue that it's bad for us. But oh wait, but Chomsky's saying the USA is doing the exploiting.
yeah,
But then Kyle Kalinske is saying no, it's America's the one being exploited by.
yeah,
The whole thing's a giant contradiction, and I consider myself a hardcore lefty. But just when it comes to the free trade, it's like the one issue where I say I'm not all about the protectionism. I'm really not, and the Cuban embargo is one of my
like
examples.
welcome to
This is not
internationalism,
good.
my friend. Welcome to internationalism.
And also, you brought up a point, and well, my last point on my list here that I'm gonna let you go into is that
What did I say?
so do we just get rid of the embargo? Does Biden just sign a piece of
Oh,
paper to get rid of the
yeah, you
embargo?
can't do that, unfortunately. There are four congressional acts that make up the Cuban embargo. Um, what Biden can do is not add on new sanctions, which unfortunately he has been talking about doing onto high level like Cuban party officials. But in terms of like the full on embargo itself, you're gonna need 60 votes in Congress to pass. Like, so
And so this
get
is different than sanctions, that when we sanction Syria and Iran,
yeah, it's mainly through the State Department whenever you impose like
and
economic
so
sanctions and whatnot.
and so if you have a sanction that's imposed through the State Department, then the president can just with a stroke of a
Yeah,
pen
because it's all
get
within
rid of
the
those.
executive branch, but this went through the legislative branch. It was signed by the executive branch. Unfortunately, we have, and when I say unfortunately, I mean thank God we have checks and balances, and one president just can't make or break embargoes.
And so this would need to be done through the entire
Through
legislative
and
body.
yeah, and then it would have to be signed by the president of the United States.
And
Um,
so, yeah, so anyone just thinking that, all right, just end the embargo. Well, we need to have the politicians in
in
place to
place
do
to
this.
actually do that, or like actually let them know, like if you truly care, like could be a voting issue. That's like also one thing to say, like it, or like at least show them, like, hey, if you vote to remove this embargo, I'm not gonna vote you out. I think that's pretty cool. Like it's not gonna hurt your popularity. It's not gonna hurt your chance by like being for this, because again, it's not being nice to communism. It's actually being nice to liberalism in a way. You are actually allowing freedom of movement, freedom of flow, free trade. Like you're doing it not because you're like a communist loving Democrat. You're doing it because you're a freaking liberal. And you believe in like the values of this nation. Invoke patriotism. Oh, another callback to a former episode. We're
Hey,
America. We believe in free ideas, free expression, and you know what?
and if you
Just
want
be
to be a communist, that's not
you
our
can
thing,
be,
but
but we
you
will
go
still
ahead and
trade
do
with
that.
you,
We'll
and
still
you know
trade with you.
that's
And
fine.
as long as you're not hurting anybody else
So
and
long as
you
you're not
guys just
threatening
do
to
your,
invade us or to hold a missile silos, we're good.
yeah. And so I just hope everyone listening kind of takes all that in. Um, you shouldn't just hate this country just because there's some horrible things in it. Yeah, yeah, they don't allow a free press. Our country is also currently prosecuting a journalist, Julian Assange. We don't come from a perfect country, and so I just don't think we should be the ones to be telling them how to live. And I'm sure if there was a bigger country than us, they would embargo America for the things that go on here. And it wouldn't be right if they did that to us. And it's not right that we do that to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Let's
all
call
right.
it. Let's wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening to Butting Heads. If you enjoyed, please be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us why we're wrong in the comment sections below.
All right, guys.
Have a good
Good
night.
night, Canada.
Okay.